Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're opening up a really fascinating, honestly pretty complex dossier. We're looking at a case study that sits dead center at the collision point of digital culture, corporate power, and human rights. We're going to investigate the timeline, the mechanics, and the intense legal battles surrounding the deplatforming of Andrew Tate. Now, our goal here, it's not to take a side. We're just here to impartially examine the data and the source material so we can understand the actual mechanics of modern content moderation. Consider this staggering reality. Within 72 hours, one of the internet's most viral creators was systematically removed from major social platforms. I mean, literally erased from practically every major platform on Earth in one fell swoop. It was an unprecedented, almost forensic sweep of a digital footprint that had captured the attention of millions worldwide. So, how does an erasure of that magnitude actually happen?
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at Phase 1, the 72-hour takedown.
To really get the scale of this digital exile, we have to look back and reconstruct the rapid succession of events from August 2022. Because, it wasn't just one platform pulling the plug. It was a total domino effect. On August 19th, Meta struck first, permanently removing Tate's official accounts from both Instagram and Facebook. Bam! Then, just 3 days later, August 22nd, TikTok followed suit, taking down his accounts after carrying out their own internal investigation. And literally the very next day, August 23rd, YouTube terminated channels associated with him, including one with over 744,000 subscribers. Just like that, in less than a week, his primary avenues of direct communication were totally severed. To put the tangible scale of this loss into perspective, just look at this number: 4.7 million. That's the exact number of Instagram followers completely wiped out in a single stroke by Meta's ban. We're talking about an audience larger than the population of many major cities just suddenly gone, completely inaccessible to the creator.
Which brings us to Phase 2, Terms of Service Violations. So, what were the official justifications for such a massive, coordinated sweep? If we look strictly at the corporate charges, we can objectively contrast the specific violations these tech giants cited. Meta claimed a breach of its dangerous individuals and organizations policy. Now, this is a framework usually reserved for extremist groups or individuals linked to significant real-world harm. YouTube, on the flip side, anchored its termination specifically on its hate speech policy, which governs how individuals or groups are spoken about on their platform.
YouTube was actually very explicit in its reasoning. Google, which owns YouTube, put out a statement saying, "We terminated channels associated with Andrew Tate for multiple violations of our community guidelines and terms of service, including our hate speech policy." It's really crucial to note here that YouTube's policy strictly prohibits content promoting violence or hatred against individuals based on attributes like sex or gender, and that includes any claims of physical or mental inferiority.
Over on TikTok, their official rationale was equally direct. A spokesperson stated, "Misogyny is a hateful ideology that is not tolerated on TikTok." But TikTok didn't just ban his official account. They actually went a step further. They actively deployed software to identify and take down re-uploads of his videos, and they started flagging offensive content so it wouldn't even show up on users' For You feeds. Now, Tate, for his part, responded to all this by saying his videos were completely taken out of context. He claimed he was playing a comedic character, and that these platforms were just amplifying false narratives.
But right here is where the story gets incredibly complex, bringing us to Phase 3, the algorithmic loophole.
See, banning an official account is one thing, but completely erasing a presence from the modern algorithmic internet, that is something else entirely. Get this, despite the official bans, Tate-related hashtags had still amassed over 12.7 billion views on TikTok alone. 12.7 billion! Now, this number does include both supporters and critics for sure, but it absolutely proves that deplatforming an individual doesn't just automatically deplatform their cultural footprint.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how this happens. Take a look at these fan-made, repackaged videos. Using motivational music, slick editing, and cinematic footage layered right over Tate's audio, dozens of videos exactly like this just continue to amass millions of views. And research shows they're frequently monetized with ads, meaning they are entirely circumventing the platform's moderation attempts.
The whole mechanism of this loophole essentially relies on third-party proxy accounts, which makes traditional deplatforming, well, incredibly difficult to enforce. It's almost like a giant game of digital whack-a-mole. He maintains his reach through guest appearances on other people's podcasts, massive fan network amplification, and armies of subscribers from his online course, The Real World. These subscribers are actually incentivized to re-upload clipped content across all platforms. Turns out, the very architecture of the internet strongly resists total deletion.
Which leads us to a major pivot in the timeline. Phase 4, the Twitter reinstatement.
To really get this, we have to rewind a bit to 2017. That's when Tate was originally permanently suspended from Twitter for controversial remarks regarding the hashtag #MeToo movement, specifically tweeting that women should bear some responsibility for being sexually assaulted. But then a massive philosophical shift happened when Elon Musk acquired the platform in late 2022. Musk, a self-professed free speech absolutist, came in and fundamentally changed the moderation doctrine. He famously summarized his brand new approach with one catchphrase: freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach.
Under this new doctrine, Musk announced he wanted to do away with permanent bans altogether, arguing that lifelong prohibitions were just fundamentally wrong. So, instead of outright removing users, the platform shifted to a model of de-boosting and demonetizing negative tweets. Following a public poll, Musk actually declared a general amnesty on the platform. And just like that, Tate's 5-year ban was officially reversed, right alongside a wave of other highly controversial figures.
This sharp contrast in how platforms handle content leads us directly into Phase 5, the free speech debate.
What we're witnessing here is a real-time, high-stakes clash between the necessity of content moderation and the principles of free expression. As researchers in this academic analysis of digital governance point out, platforms are caught in this incredibly deep tension. Tech companies are fundamentally torn. On one hand, they need to detoxify user environments to protect people and, let's be honest, appease advertisers. But on the other hand, they're pressured to uphold open, democratic ideals of free speech. It is a massive tightrope walk, and there are literally billions of dollars and profound cultural influence on the line.
And hey, this debate isn't just academic. It's playing out right now in federal court. In April 2026, a U.S. federal court in California completely threw out a $50 million lawsuit brought by Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan against Meta over those 2022 Instagram bans. The brothers had sued for breach of contract and reputational harm, basically arguing that their removal was influenced by external scrutiny rather than just neutral rule enforcement.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the legal precedent that actually made this dismissal possible. It all comes down to Section 230. You've probably heard of it. It's a foundational piece of U.S. law that essentially acts as a giant shield for tech companies. It protects online platforms from being held liable for the content their users post, but crucially, it also protects them when they make proactive decisions to moderate, remove, or manage that content. The judge completely rejected the Tate brothers' free speech arguments, pointing straight to this fundamental legal reality. The ruling stated plainly, and I quote, "The First Amendment limits only government action. Meta is a private company, not a government body. This legally cements the fact that social media platforms are, at the end of the day, private entities. They have the absolute right to enforce their own content rules, and honestly, without offering notice or appeal rights if they choose not to."
All of this leaves us grappling with what we can call the modern digital paradox. As civil rights groups and researchers are quick to point out, platforms are under immense, constant pressure to regulate harmful content. Yet, and here's the kicker, these exact same platforms utilize engagement-enhancing algorithms that inherently amplify the very inflammatory, divisive rhetoric they claim to be fighting against. Why? Because that highly charged content generates the most clicks, the most views, and ultimately, the most profit. It's a huge catch-22, and the lines of accountability are completely blurred.
As we close this dossier, we've walked through the timeline, the staggering view counts, the algorithmic loopholes, and the shifting legal definitions of free speech in private digital spaces. The evidence presents a massive, fundamental challenge to how we govern the modern public square. So I leave you with this final, critical question to weigh for yourself. Where does platform moderation end and digital censorship begin?
Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. If you want to keep unpacking the complex systems that shape our world with clear, structured insights, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Subscribe to follow every dossier. I'll see you in the next one.